Hi, this is Sean Cahill, and you're listening to that UFO podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and I'm delighted to finally welcome onto the podcast with me, keeping it in the UK for this show, a respected investigative researcher in the UK and around the world, with almost 40 years investigating a range of phenomena, including UFOs, cryptids, the paranormal, and much, much more. Owner of the popular Phenomena magazine, he is also owner of the Awakening Expo, which runs in Blackpool this year from the 24th to the 26th of June. I will announce the winner of the 2 tickets being given away later in today's show, but thank you to everyone who entered that online. Before then, I'd very much like to welcome Mr. Steve Mera to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to finally speak to you. The podcast's been going just over 2 years, and there's been many times you've been requested as a guest or mentioned, and I think I've been round quite a bit of the UK, so it's good to finally get to you. And the timing works out fantastically well with Awakening coming up on the horizon as well.
It does,
Um,
A bit timing.
Before we get to Awakening, which we're going to talk about, you've got a long, illustrious, storied career within the world of UFOs and other phenomena, and I want to talk about that first. What was it that first attracted to you to this world of the unexplained?
I'm blaming my dad. It's as simple as that. It's easy to do. he had he had a load of books on the subject when I was young, and I think when my friends were reading comics and stuff, I was tucking into Eric von Daniken and Brad Steiger books, back then. And I was interested. I was interested from a very young age. And then I just took it from there, really. My interest turned into a full-time job for 40 years now. So it's been an interesting journey, to
Yeah,
say the least.
I can appreciate that. For me, it was my gran. She used to tell me all kinds of stories, and she had all kinds of library books that were 20 and 30 years overdue to go back. I believe that the Philadelphia experiment was one of them. I always
Yeah,
remember that was 16 years and counting at the
yeah,
time, and that was 20 years ago. And I remember going round to the library, and you would go to that mystery section or whatever it was, and there was books on Nessie, and back then you could rent VHS for me, and you could take the videos
yeah.
home, and I used to watch all sorts.
I know
And
it's a very strange feeling when you look back to those times when I was young and looking at those books and the videos that you could get in that time and now like I can it's just strange to say that I'd met these people now and have worked with these people. Brad Steiger did before he passed away, and then his wife. Still work with Eric von Daniken regularly. And it is a strange, I suppose, that I would have never dreamt that, when I first picked up those books, I'm going to be working with or, dealing with these people in the future. It's just a strange event. And so like I say, the universe takes you where it wants to take you. And all those doors opened for me, which was profound, really. And I just kind of followed the path.
on a very slight side note, do you miss the physical media side of things, like getting a book or getting a tape, and holding something physical? Now it's all just online, and it's maybe a bit less personal almost.
Yeah, it is. I mean, years ago, I had a large collection of VHS tapes, and you could, you ordered them, you grabbed them when you can. Had a special video player to play American tapes as well, so I could purchase them overseas because there was more coming out of America in them days. Yeah, I mean, my archive was huge. Over the years, I've accumulated so much material. And then all of a sudden, we switched, and now the world's at our fingertips regarding this information. It's information overload now. It's actually the opposite. Hard to get hold of stuff back then, but now it's just overload of material.
And it's trying to find that genuine material and what's right and what's not, and it's anyone can put something out online, whereas 20, 30 years ago and longer, it took some doing to put a book out. Back then, what were some of your own early experiences or sightings? Was it to do with the paranormal? Was it UFOs?
Well, I started in the subject of UFOs back in 1983. My first investigation was in Liverpool regarding a couple that had witnessed strange light in the sky, and the hand had took some photographs of it. And it was just a light in the sky, but it was still classed as a UFO back then. And I spent probably about 15 years in the subject of UFOs until I thought, pretty much exhausted as much as I possibly could go, because I was always one, wanted to find rational explanations, or is there any explanation for some of these things? And of course, my mentors told me back then that, it's a very nuts and bolts phenomena. These crafts are traveling the vast distances of space. You may be using some type of exotic engines, and they're extraterrestrials, and they want good for us and good for Earth, and all those sort of things. Wonderful stories. Um, but after 15 years, I thought, do you know what? This is just not going anywhere. We are regurgitating, going round and round and round in a circle. And after 15 years, I thought, what do I do now? Another photo and another video is just going to add to the mountain we already had. But I was very interested in about how people perceive the phenomena, so I kind of got involved in the in psychology, behavioral psychology, and then into parapsychology, and then into the paranormal, advanced paranormal studies and stuff like that. And I spent the next 20 years in parapsychological circles and conducting specialized tests, and a number of different projects. And then what I realized was the frustration of not getting anywhere within the subject of ufology was because it lacked the information that we required to make any conclusive, conclusions. And that's because the information lies not in the subject of ufology, but in the subject of the metaphysical, the paranormal, the supernatural, the spiritual, and so on and so forth. So for me, later in life, I realized that what we have to do is because we've got this compartmentalization between the subjects. The paranormal guys have never dealt with UFO guys, and vice versa in many different fields. I started to tear down those barriers, those walls that's compartmentalized us for so long. And then it started to realize that there's attributes associated from various different fields to the UFO phenomena. And then I started to think, okay, well, this is providing new areas of research. It's adding some bits to the picture that we originally had. And I thought, well, okay, this is probably the best way to move forward. And now what we're hearing, is we are on the cusp of ufology changing. I can guarantee that. And we are leaning well away from that old hypothesis that they're traveling the vast distances of the space. Um, that even the extraterrestrial hypothesis, to be honest with you, it has changed considerably. And I'm good, really, because I think that is the best way to move forward. So what I do now is I've incorporated both studies of fields of what I've learned over the years and been involved in, into the same pot. I throw everything into the same pot. I refer to it as phenomenology, and it's a lot more deliverable in regarding answers than it is just just being able to being stuck in one particular box. Say for ufology as an example, they are limitations when you actually do that. So I've researched the crop circle phenomena extensively, the cryptid phenomena extensively, the paranormal, the supernatural, or demological, if you want to call it that, all aspects of UAP and UFO phenomena, and kind of been involved in all. I've been involved in missing people investigations and all sorts of different things, which I would consider anomalous phenomena or profound, unusual stuff. And it's led me to this point in time when I look at the cocktail of phenomena which is presenting itself, and I can attribute some to this, some to this, some to this, these different areas, where in fact that's what it really does consist of, and I don't really want to know why it was compartmentalized so much. Maybe it was done on purpose to stop us sort of gaining answers to a phenomena. But now we've dropped all those barriers, we are gaining some footage, and which is good because it's leading us in a direction away from the old hypothesis, and leading us into new areas of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, paranormal mechanics, and all those sort of things, and even a strong connection to Earth and geological phenomena. So that's good for us because we're advancing the subject. No longer is ufology or UAP studies static. We are moving forward now, taking some steps now.
I swear you can read my next question because you've covered so much of it within the answer already. But it's an interesting point you raise. I want to ask, how far can that line of thinking go, that so many of the areas within these different subjects of phenomenology are connected? There are some who will link, Bigfoot to UFOs and Nessie to UFOs. For me, that's a tad far, some of those. But what about yourself? What are some of the more unusual links that you've uncovered?
Well, surprisingly, there's links all over the place. I mean, if we just take for an example, the paranormal, which we refer to as a very old earthly phenomena, has numerous similarities, or well, identifiers, should we say, identical things taking place in the subject of UFOs. We find that this phenomena predates historical documentation. So it goes back, maybe we're the new kids on the block, who knows? I mean, it goes back as long as we can possibly think. But I mean, when we say going back that, I mean, my colleague who I work with, we got it back to, I think, 700,000 BC in Botswana, But what's interesting is that how this phenomenon, as it tracks through time, it changes its appearance. The phenomena stays the same, but the mask is forever changing, which I don't know if we really ever seen the true phenomena. I mean, everything seems to be a representation of the phenomena, because it's interchangeable and can provide physiological constructs for us to interact with. So I would say that it's been going on since as long as we can think of. The aspects of the paranormal we used to put in a separate category as a separate box. We were wrong to do so, because the characteristics what take place in UFO encounters crosses over into the paranormal, crosses over into the cryptid phenomena. Now, the cryptid phenomena is a tricky one because you may have, there is that possibility that in the most remote regions on planet Earth there are some large creatures which might be in existence. I mean, it takes me back to the days of when they first discovered the panda bear. Somebody come running out of the forest one day in Japan and said, we told people what he'd seen, this strange creature milling about, quite slow moving, black and white, stands out in a forest of green, and they set off to try and discover more of them, and they didn't find the next one to 60 years later. So that's because the environment it was living in is just it's not easy to trek through. It's not easy for humankind to venture forth into it, and that's why it's not so much of it being elusive. It's basically because of the geology. Now, it's the same applies, regarding if you talk about US Bigfoot, you know, there's a lot of people I've talked to out there who believe it's a real physical creature. I can't argue with that because there's physical evidence. But then there's physical evidence from paranormal encounters, and those supposed to be, many people think them to be non-physical phenomena, and that's not the case. Um, but then, when we talk about cryptids in the UK, we have, surprisingly, we have had Bigfoot in the UK seen quite a lot. It's not feasible to say an animal could live in the UK, and not be known, especially the amount of food it would require. Um, to be sighted so many times, But we have cryptids such as the dogmen and the werewolf type thing. That actually also happens overseas. Plenty of cases in the US of that. But the phenomena associated with the cryptids is we have lots of Oz factor type experiences, which are associated to the void of sound, this sudden silence before the incident. I mean, certain frequencies that the phenomena could be generating, infrasonic frequencies, which can also cause your sensory perceptions to be altered. Even scent glands can be altered through frequency to make you think you're smelling sulfur. And sulfur is associated with those reports. Sulfur is also associated to the UFO phenomena. So you find many occasions these crossovers between them. And you find so many between them that you consider that there's a likely explanation that these deliverable phenomena are from a source that is delivering different things. And, we look at them as separate entities when in fact, they are pretty much one of the same thing.
So if you look at these various phenomena as being under one umbrella, do you think the case is more likely as we discover, like you say, more and more about, quantum physics and what the nature of reality is, we learn about consciousness, that potentially we aren't and haven't always been the dominant species on this planet, and that there are other species that, like you say, the panda wasn't hiding from us, it wasn't being evasive, we just couldn't find it. And
Yeah.
it's quite likely there's a chance that we hear now, especially in the world of UFOs, that there are potentially non-human intelligences. Lou Elizondo famously referred to mankind's, that
Hmm.
maybe we should start looking closer to home, and there's
Well,
potentially
yeah,
something else
yeah.
on this planet we just can't see.
I totally agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, we've had this ruse for many years to stare up at the sky and think, these things coming from the vast distances of space to travel. It's too sci-fi for my liking. It's like a Star Trek episodes unfolding. I mean, they're all bipedal and they're all, they must be. I mean, if you take for an example, how many different types of entities have been seen worldwide, there's over 2,000 of them. Are they all coming from 2,000 different planets out there? You talk to the SETI guys, which we've done, and they said, well, you know what? It's quite an interesting quote, actually. Space is unusually quiet. That's what they said. Unusually quiet. We're not seeing a superhighway backwards and forwards traveling to Earth. I mean, we get some bits and bobs now and again, but we're not. I mean, if we look statistical surveys carried out, the most recent one was pretty much only 3/4 of the countries on the planet participated in. The sightings would be reported roughly about every 10 seconds. Now, you have to take in consideration some of those are hoaxes, not true. Some of them are misidentifications. But at the same time, you can also be conservative because not everybody's reporting them.
Yep.
So even if we just rounded it off to say, all right, there's 10 seen there's one seen every 10 seconds, then where are they all coming from? Because one thing is for sure, they're not got a super highway of traffic going in and out, passing backwards and forwards to Earth. We'd see ionospheric disturbances all the time. Would it be easy to record and track? And that's not the case. What the evidence supports is that it has a much more geological basis as opposed to aerial. I mean, we might see things in the sky, but when we're looking up, we're usually unaware of what's really happening in our geology in the ground because we know that this phenomena can has the capabilities of the metaphysical changes, so that it can enter into cliffs, it can go into the ground, it can go into hillsides, it can go into volcanoes. We aware of that it breaches the physical reality we know. So when ATIP comes out and says, there's trans medium travel of crafts, well, yeah, we can accept that they could fly in space, possibly. If they can fly underwater, if they get underwater, they can go in space, as long as they can deal with pressure. And flying in our atmosphere makes it three different forms of travel. But they left out purposely the one that enters into the physical land, where we've videoed them going into land and seen them going in there. So that's been left out purposely, and the reasons for that was because there's only so much the scientific community can digest. So what we need to do is that we have to, and don't get me wrong, Lou's very aware of this other star. I've talked to him about this. He's very aware of all the extra stuff, but to just throw it out on the table is a bit could be discouraging to scientific teams. So since the Pentagon came out and mentioned about the footage that they got and the pilot's incidents reported, there was a lot of interest from the scientific community, which are starting to look in and assist their, offer their services in regarding the research of UAP. If we were to just throw it on the table, all that woo-woo stuff, then they're not. It's going to be too hard for them to digest. So it has to be done in digestible chunks, deliverable chunks to them along the way. We can't just throw it out on the table because we will only scare them away. I mean, trying to say, okay, well, we've got to reconstruct physics in a sense of speaking, because the physics that we know doesn't comprehend how it can be broken by this phenomena. or manipulated. So we have to do it in digestible chunks. So, but we are getting there in the higher. I mean, I'm with a number of think tanks on this, and work is going. Work is being carried out. Tests are being carried out, and it is almost there. It's almost just about to flip, where there'll be more evidence to support it's a terrestrial phenomena. It's not necessarily within our reality. We could be dealing with another reality, very close and right next door to us. That's confirmed by scientists at Harvard University. And it pops in and it pops out. It manifests and demanifests. It materializes and dematerializes. Very similar to the apport phenomenon of the UFO, of the paranormal and poltergeist stuff. In fact, the analysis of an apported mug, um, the details that we got back from the investigation and analysis of that showed that there had been such a huge diathermic reaction. It was very hard to identify it was the original mug that left. But the diathermic reactions in the mug were identical to the diathermic reactions in plants under the investigation of what is referred to as plant traumatology analysis. I'll explain what that is. That is when a UFO is seen to manifest close to the ground, woof, just appears. It affects the plant growth. It disappears. The scientists go in, take the plants for analysis, and find out it's got these diathermic reaction. What's interesting is that they're almost identical, if not identical, which would suggest that the sudden manifestation of a UFO and the sudden manifestation of a mug as an apport are utilizing the very same physics are involved. Now, if we're dealing with something which is from some other planet, and we're also putting it against something which is paranormal based, which is said to be an old earthly phenomenon, we shouldn't be seeing similarities in the physics of it, of the physics of that, that materialization on both sides being so identical. So we have to say, okay, there's another thing, there's another connection between the two, and there's not just one, there's many, many, many of these, Andy. So is enough there now to say, let's put it on the table and say, okay, we are dealing with a source, and that source is deliverable to us in numerous different ways, which also has the capabilities of creating physiological constructs, physical things, which we presume to be real. I mean, what is real? I mean, because people have said that they've felt the presence of an apparition and they've had physical contact. Sometimes they've been prodded, pulled, whatever. It's in our reality. It physically interacts with us and our environment. So you say, okay, it has some physicality to it, just like the UFO phenomena, just like the cryptids and so on and so forth. So what is that deliverable source is more the question. And it likes to have a laugh. It likes to trick us. It likes to play games. There is plenty of evidence of that over the years through scientific studies in this field. And you'll also get the apparition phenomena and the manifestation of phenomena during round saints tables, seances and stuff. Those were the first ones that came into communication with entities and UFOs long before they were documented in newspapers being seen in the skies and stuff. And the Vril Society got involved in that in Germany, and we had some experiments take place in Canada, the Philip experiment. We also in England we had the Skull experiment going on. I was involved with some of the more advanced stuff as we moved on. I had associates, friends of mine that are involved in the sort of advanced studies of Skull. We went one further into Phenomena Project, which was again the same type of study program. And it's surprising that those entities, small UFOs would appear about the size of a dinner plate, shining lights down. They are physical. Balls of light, which are physical, they have mass. You can catch them in your hands. You can feel the weight to them. The light travels through your fingers. There's a very close association between what we thought was just paranormal in that UFO field, and even contact cases. So for me, it's all just one great big pot, and we've conducted new research now, which is known as Project Doorway. We've been on that for about 5 years now. A lot of travelling around the planet, but A lot of really interesting evidence and conclusions that we've reached regarding when these objects manifest, that they leave a gravitational disturbance, a gravitational well, which is measurable. It's
Yep.
measurable. It's like residual into our environment for a short period of time, and it's measurable. And you can actually even see the effects of this through light bending through the gravitational wells. So yeah, we are getting somewhere. We really are advancedly moving forward now in this subject, and it's just on its edge now. It's just about ready to flip over, because at the higher end, you've got these guys, the scientist guys, saying, doing the experiments and looking at that side of the thing. And the other side, that old 70 years, we can't ignore it, just as the government shouldn't. The last 70 years of UFO phenomena, we can't ignore that. There's some very, very interesting phenomena that's been reported and seen by many, many military people, very well documented. Those can't be ignored. Um, and I think it's not so much that we are rebooting it under the heading of UAP now. We've made it something a little bit more easier for academics to offer their services and help us gain that extra footage now. Because, scientists would never be involved with UFO, but now UAP, well, that's a little bit different. So, I'm hoping that will assist us plentiful.
Let me unpack some of that, Steve, because there's a lot within there. And good luck to my co-host Dan, who likes to go back and watch these and do the timestamps for YouTube. So when he's listening back to this, good luck unpacking all that. It was a lot of information. Couple of things to bring up though. The plant traumatology, and you talk about UFOs materializing close to the ground. Is that potentially where we get crop circles from? Is that a link to that, where they create some sort of pattern, or are you just talking about an impact on the immediate
I
flora
think,
and
well,
fauna?
my conclusion on crop circles is going to be slightly different than anybody else's you'd ever probably heard.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that the phenomena creates crop circles. I think we can create crop circles. I mean, I know some very good people, and what they can do, they can even do weaved crop circles, in the middle of the night, and it is remarkable. You look at it, you think it's absolutely possible to create, but it isn't. It's just mathematics at the end of the day. But I will tell you, during the test in 1996, scientists were involved, some researchers were involved, and of course, some of these guys that I know, which are very, very good at creating this phenomena. And they went out into the field and created a remarkable, remarkable crop formation. But what was really interesting is that the phenomena that was registered from equipment afterwards by the science team, they couldn't understand. It was as if that somehow by creating the crop formation, the end result of that is that there was phenomenal readings in that formation, and it shouldn't be. I mean, just the guys just went out there and pressed wheat down. It shouldn't have been. I mean, they did test prior, and there was nothing unusual there.
Mm-hmm.
Afterwards, there was lots of unusual things, readings, and all sorts of strange things going on, and couldn't understand how that happens. And I think there's something going on in regarding the geology and the human consciousness in regarding the creation of phenomena, uh, which is being recorded and monitored diversely through crop circles around the world. But what we've done is we've looked at that and thought it was an external phenomena. I mean, I come across people all the time saying this is an authentic crop circle, but what makes a crop circle authentic? Well, they pick up readings in them. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that it's a phenomenon that's created it. Don't get me wrong, there are patches of areas where it has been adversely affected, not so much a crop formation, but adversely affected by possibly the UFO phenomenon. Yeah, I completely get that, and I completely understand about the microwave effects on some of these plants. But I mean, when you look at the results of um, the analysis that was in this crop circle, it fell in line with many of the other crop circles which were thought to be authentic around the world. And yet, this one was recorded and manufactured in the field as we were there, and yet afterwards it was left with the signature marks of an authentic crop circle. So that kind of blew my mind a little bit. I mean, I thought to myself, well, what's going on there then? Because if that can happen, then we have to be looking at, is it our intent? Is there a conscious connection between the geology of the ground and what we're doing? Um, maybe there's certainly more an area there to explore. Absolutely, more testing to be carried out. But I was stumped on that one.
That's
Absolutely.
that's really interesting. Another point I wanted to bring out, you mentioned that so many sightings go unreported. Now, I've said many times on the podcast, and newer listeners to the podcast recently, especially through the month of May, where we've had a lot of new listeners and viewers on YouTube, won't know the podcast logo is a sighting I had in the mid-90s in Glasgow. And there were 5 of us, including my mum, my sister, and a friend and his mum. And we saw basically a Ferris wheel sized UFO about half a mile down the road. If you know Knightswood in Glasgow, it was
Yeah.
in a very built up area, lots of houses, no fields, and it was pretty much next to a leisure centre. And this thing was at a tilted angle, spinning at an incredible speed. Now, we all saw this. It wasn't up in the sky, it was pretty much on the ground. And we looked at it, noticed it, and left. We didn't stay to watch it, we just observed it. Isn't that interesting? I
Hmm.
was a little bit scared, a little bit nervy, but as a kid having an interest in UFOs, thought it was fascinating. But we just went on our way and walked home, lost sight of it, and that was it. It never disappeared, never went away. But I wonder, do you see any commonalities in your decades of research and investigations where people who report or even don't report get a sense of they saw something because they were meant to see it, but not necessarily talk about it? Or do
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
I wonder, is it a case of
Yeah.
we saw that in an area there would have been lots of people, but did other
No,
people
not
necessarily
necessarily.
see the same thing?
Well, that's what makes this the UFO phenomena so unusual. I mean, when you have incidents where half the country should have seen it, only a handful of people will. You know, it is selective viewing. It's an observer effect. It's a conscious connection with the phenomenon. And certain people in a given area might see it, where the majority wouldn't. You know, and that we do get many, many times. There's a level, and if you're tuned in with that level, you're going to be an experiencer and see it. And if you're not, then you're not. It's as simple as that. I mean, there's a big thing to say. You know, when you talk to people and say, "I've never seen anything in my life," that's fine, that's great, that's wonderful. But is that because of the way they are and the way they think and the way they observe the world? Because the person around the corner has been seeing them all his life, you know, and what's difference between these people? You know, there is significant differences between certain people, and I think this phenomenon can target. It can certainly target people to experience a phenomenon and others not. Or that there is, in fact, that there's certain people which are just in tune with the right type of frequency and consciousness at that moment in time to experience it. I mean, see these things in our world, but we don't know if they fully exist within our reality. It would do for you and many of the people with you. But if it did for everybody, then you know you think half the country would have been reporting these things. Some of them are huge, football field lengths in size, and they just don't. They're going to get reported by 4 people passing on a bus one day, and it's so profound. That's what makes it so profound. This phenomenon that it's much more than just a nuts and bolts craft. There is a new studies now that we're working on. Can I say that? Yeah, I can say this. There's new studies that we're working on now. It's called we have specialized equipment which can cause to obtain data from chemical analysis from UAP. When you target UAP with this equipment, you can get a chemical analysis readout. Some of those chemical analysis readouts are pertaining to data which is identifiable as a living organism, some of these things. So the UAP phenomenon needs even to be broke down into structured craft, living organisms, intelligent plasma. You know, we haven't got to that point yet, but you know, we would have to do that. We've got to break it down because there seems to be a multitude of things. You know, high ionospheric living organisms for one thing. NASA know about them. People experience them and reporting them when they're usually pilots at 75,000 feet high. You know, stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of strange things in our atmosphere. But are they fully in our reality is a different question or not. You know, some are, some aren't. And if you just talk about some of these incidents like the Phoenix Lights incidents, not only did we have the lights over the mountain range, but we had giant, huge objects seen, flying wings,
Mm.
but they shimmered as they passed over, literally 100 feet above people, residential homes. And these were so big, they said they literally could land a jet on one of the wings. It's alone, could act as a runway. But they shimmered, and there was no radar readings from these things apart at all. Not from those huge. They should have lit up radar systems like a Christmas tree, and apparently it didn't. But then, is that shimmer relating to the skirting our reality? We might visually see them, but are they fully there in our reality? So, and we get lots of reports like that in the UAP or UFO phenomenon when they're kind of, yes, they are in our reality. 1 minute they're caught on radar, next minute they're not. They are, they're not. They have the capabilities, this phenomena, to seemingly jump out of our reality into theirs, or even just cusp it. So we just get we just might get one aspect, such as might see it, but it doesn't exist on radar. It doesn't exist in a physical sense. Some people have reported apparitional that some of these things have seemed to become see-through. So we have to question that their capabilities in regarding our physiological world might be massively different. So we've got a lot of things it's not going to be easy, but we've got a lot of things to contend with in the future regarding the UAP.
And especially the talk about some of these objects experiencing time in a different way to how we do could justify how they move. And the Tic Tac famously was apparently moving like a ping pong ball inside of a glass when it was hovering above the water. And
Yeah,
people saying it was almost like a glitch. And Dan, who's on the podcast with me, mentioned that it seemed like a mobile phone when you drop it, and your mobile phone, for people on YouTube, will
yeah,
tumble and fall.
yeah.
And that seemed to be how the Tic Tac was moving until it noticed Fravor, and then it pointed up and straightened up and maneuvered properly. So again, it doesn't have to make sense and necessarily be a craft moving from A to B. If this
No,
craft is moving through time, and I think that's something I've been talking about abductions at times on the podcast, and people talk about abductions happening to their family through generations, and you think, why would a UFO and some entities be interested in your grandchildren and your grandparents and everything in between? Well,
mm,
what if for them that was half an hour? But for
yeah,
you, it's been 100 years of your family. But for them, they've just
exactly.
been dipping in and out the timeline, and it's very, very
Yeah,
different.
yeah. I mean, we say people have missing time for like 2 hours, but they could have been just taken for a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, a minute on their craft, wherever we are, they could have been like 2 hours out of time. We say, can you account for time? Well, not really, which is really interesting. But we do have evidence of the time association, the time differentials in regarding the phenomena. There's something known as a DT meter now. It's a time displacement meter. And when we measure in locations where we've had recent manifestation activity of the UAP phenomena, or UFO phenomena. There is on some occasions latency, which is measurable. It might only be 18 milliseconds, but it shouldn't exist unless there's miniature black holes around. It just shouldn't exist. So there is an association with, like you were saying, about time as well. But you know what? We didn't suss this. Our ancient ancestors sussed this years and years back. By utilizing key locations of energy, geological energies on the Earth, also utilizing the terahertz frequency from the sun, which we only get from rising sun or setting sun, and combining them in resonant chambers and creating an om, which is very difficult to deliver now because vocal cords have changed of humans, and sometimes it takes years. And we want to look at the Gudra mantra for once. It takes about 20 years to learn it. That's even if you've got the vocal cords to do it, So but as a combination of frequencies, two set different frequencies, one deliverable by light, one deliverable by vocal, and it's what we refer to as the double lock system. That double lock system takes place in the central point of these resonant chambers, um, allowing those individuals to have the experience of communication with deities. Now, that the process of that, I mean, it's been done all over the world, and the same methods were done pretty much. I mean, they were very, very clever, our ancient ancestors. Of course, we're not as clever as them in that sense because though we've advanced, we've lost all we've de-evolved internally. Physiologically we're fine, but psychologically we've de-evolved. Our ancient ancestors probably could have even heard, the infrasonic sounds of planet Earth at 7.83 hertz. So the Schumann resonance. So they could have probably picked. I'm absolutely guaranteed they would have picked up on that because there's evidence in the writings and the work and the work that they've left behind in stone. it tells us that they must have had knowledge of these frequencies, where to build things, how to build things, and of course we've lost that internally. Us, sapiens now, um, compared to our ancestors who were just Homo sapiens, we've devolved in a psychological sense, but evolved in another. So we're trying to gather up. I mean, a lot of our information doesn't lie in the future. It means to go back into the past and learn a bit about what our ancients are like. You can't get that from digging up an old bone, unfortunately. And tell us about their consciousness, the spirituality, what they were capable of doing psychically, and can't do it from a bone. Nobody will ever tell us. You can't get that information, unfortunately, now. But the evidence lies behind. It tells us that they were very well aware of this phenomena and interacted with this phenomenon. Sometimes they didn't want to interact with this phenomenon in certain places where they destroyed their own locations where they were having these communications with deities. So it's a phenomenon that's tracked through time over and over again and perceived its change. And maybe in years to come it'll change again. We won't have the Greys, we'll have something else. I mean,
Well,
where's our Space Brothers now? I
yeah.
mean,
Let me ask, Steve. It's an interesting point you mentioned. It seemed to at one point have had an ability or a relationship with these other beings. Whether you want to look at chariots of the gods, the pyramids and Stonehenge, where we communicating with other beings that we then went on to call gods and deities, and various religions were formed throughout the world, even to modern day cargo cults, where tribes in the jungles saw aircraft of
yeah,
our own landing and thinking these were incredible technologies that were unimaginable, and they built runways to see if they would land again, but they never did because we didn't need that piece of land. Do you think we've gone from a place of not needing the technology and having that kind of spiritual connection to whatever these things may have been? We've gone through a period of evolution where we've gone away from that spiritual side and consciousness side of or any kind of connection to the universe, and we're moving into a more technological age where now the technology is getting to a point we can replace that connection with the technological side of things, and maybe we're going to get back away, and maybe that's why these sightings increase, why we can see these things better. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, there's always a worry when you're referring to, transhumanism and how artificial intelligence might help us achieve some things. In many ways, it will. In other ways, though, it won't. I think, one of the biggest things that we're unaware of is the geology. I mean, we know that this phenomenon. I mean, we realised we got on track with this, utilizing different satellites in orbit, looking at the gravitational anomalies and positive magnetic anomalies. And myself and my colleague Barry Fitzgerald worked on that extensively and cross-checked over 2,000 different cases worldwide, major UFO events, and they all were taking place in areas which are over 250 nanoteslas. So realize that those areas have a low bacterial area. These are safe zones. And so if you're going to enter into an environment, you enter into a safe zone and you leave on that safe zone. So it's kind of it's like I guess it's I suppose it's a bit like a person might take the doctors that do operations, for an example. It's a very sterile zone. These areas of over 250 nanoteslas. I mean, bacteria doesn't like positive magnetic energy, so it doesn't do them any good. So therefore, these are pretty much safe zones. There's low bacterial levels there. We know that they're manifesting in these key locations, but we weren't the first to figure that out. I mean, Philip Corso, who wrote Day After Roswell, he said in 1982, and this is going back some time, that the US government were monitoring at least between 5 and 7 in major positive magnetic regions in association to UFO manifestations. And I think they hit the nail on the head. There are key locations around this planet that seemingly have phenomena. I mean, it's like we can go all the way back to Skinwalker Ranch. For instance, it's not about the ranch; it's about the ground. It's about the location. And again, it's a positive magnetic region over 250 nanoteslas. It's the same for I know 6 ranches actually. It's not just one. There's 6 active ones, and yeah, Skinwalker is still active. I mean, my colleague was there, Barry. Sent Barry over. Barry went over in October 2019. The phenomenon is still going on, but it seems to have moved out towards the ridgeline. somewhat, but it's still present. And it is for these other ranches as well. But it's not the ranches, it's the ground, it's the locations, these active locations where there's these interactions. Now, we could say people like to say, oh, well, there's portals and da 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 da, though I don't really like the word. Even NASA are using the darn word now. I mean, they confirmed through the MMS mission of 4 satellites, which went out maybe about, what was that now? Probably about 5 years ago, something like that, that portals exist. Not only are they large, but they are sustainable. They use the word portal. You know, they confirm they're real. So their professional name is an electron diffusion region. And what happens when it's sustainable? Well, you know, you start getting into the ideas of sustaining wormhole technology, and there is a lots of evidence which NASA have got now and other astronomical departments to show that there's could be a lot of evidence to wormhole initiation techniques and stuff like that. So it's getting very interesting. But this phenomena seems to utilize key locations on planet Earth, and you can track that. And you not only when you go to those locations, though, interestingly enough, they're also very potent in regarding paranormal disturbances or cryptids or mysterious disappearances. And I say mysterious, I mean the most profound of disappearances. And these locations just keep popping up and up again. So we visited those locations. We thought, well, okay, if that's the case, we'll put it to the test, and we did, and we witnessed phenomena firsthand on numerous occasions. But the problem is that it's massive dealing with that phenomena because we don't really know what we're going to have. I mean, it's not all love and light, Andy. I can tell you that. But the problem is that within this subject, there's a lot of people want to push that forward, the love and light aspect, and brush under the carpet the ones which aren't. And you can't. You cannot brush under the carpet. The ones which haven't ended well for people.
Yeah.
Not all. It's and I have to look at the subject as a whole rather than just picking a side here. And I can say it's very manipulative, it's very deceptive, and it's exactly the same manipulation and deceptive I found within the seance circle experiments and stuff like that, which we took place for years. It's the same. It's exactly the same deception. It's exactly the same methodology that the phenomena uses either side. So it makes it more intriguing to me, that there's these connections between this phenomena. But it doesn't help us when we're being delivered that information. That, oh well, they're coming from someone on the planet, and that's okay. I don't. Where's the evidence for that? Well, if you want to search out all the evidence for that, I tell you where it comes from. It comes from the entities themselves telling people, oh yeah, well we come from here or we come from there. Um, and I wouldn't believe that, nor would I believe information being passed to us to be authentic around the science table. When we got to a point where advanced studies of science circles and communications, instrumental transcommunication, and DVP, direct voice phenomena, the phenomena got to a point where we could ask 10 questions. We said, okay, we can ask it 10 questions. And it delivered all 10 answers before we even gave the question, because it reads us, it knows us in our mind. The phenomena can tell us anything, it can obtain it from us, So don't be shocked to be told it's your uncle or whatever, because that's what's in your mind, You'll be what you expect it to be, just like a poltergeist can seemingly manifest itself to be something which is of a long lost relative when it wasn't initially at all in the first place. We create in a sense a tulpa to some degrees, so it's very, very tricky, but we have to come up with new methods of research and push forward. Project Doorway is doing that. I mean, we've got so much evidence now. I mean, it's quite remarkable that we're dealing with an age-old phenomena that's quite manipulative. It has its own agenda to do what it wants to do, and has been conducting so under the guise of so many different disguises over the years. And they do get it wrong. They get it wrong sometimes. A craft appears and it's not big enough to carry the occupants, or it's got portholes and rivets around. And they didn't get that right. I mean, you shouldn't have portholes and rivets around some extraterrestrial craft you wouldn't expect to see it. So yeah, you get it wrong sometimes. It's not a perfect situation, but yeah, it makes it all intriguing because no matter what you were going to experience, whilst we were out there, we experienced it. And like I say, they can put a lovely light show on. They can glamour, you know. But what you got to be aware of is that, whilst you're being glamoured and looking at these beautiful lights, you got to be aware of what might be on the ground behind you, So you don't know what type of experience you're going to have. And some people have had bad experiences. So I'm not a promoter of bad experiences. I'm a promoter of the phenomena. And when I go and lecture around the world, I'll deliver the phenomena. Good, bad, take it as it is. It's not all love and light. And can we believe all the information and they're very, very tricky, these things sometimes.
I'm going to put the link to your Contact in the Desert presentation on Project Doorway and other phenomena that was involved. That's available online. It'll be in the description for the show for anyone who wants to check that out. Very interesting. I've managed to get through most of it myself as well, and just in researching this show. So definitely check that out, folks. You mentioned yourself before that you felt you had exhausted the UFO subject by the late 90s, and then obviously you've come back into it as your investigations and research have gone on. Many would say, and I include myself in this as someone who's had a lifelong interest in the UFO topic, that in 2017 the New York Times article To the Stars Academy and other things that happened at that time for many changed the course of ufology. I've talked about at that point there being a bit of a fork in the road, that there was one camp and one train of thought for many, and it sort of split at that point, and we're still seeing the ramifications of that split now. How have you seen the subject change in just those last kind of 4 or 5 years?
Well, I see, it's no longer the elephant in the room now, which is a good point, because you don't need to take my word for it. There's plenty of people saying that UAP exists now. So, but the problem for me is I don't know if it's a real true phenomenon we're experiencing in that test region of where the naval military aircraft do those types of things. I'm not identifying it. I've got it on the shelf at the minute, really, to be honest with you, and I haven't concluded on it as yet because I'll tell you the reasons why. Is I've seen a very technological craft there moving around. It's probably more likely drone type stuff. The craft was it was very interestingly that the pilots, when reported the Tic Tac, had 4 prongs underneath, and suddenly they disappeared from all reference and stuff. Don't know why, but the original sightings portray that. And those 4 prongs are like to be pit-up tubes. Pit-up tubes are used for GPS navigation on unmanned aircraft. And can be utilized, that information can be fed from a satellite in orbit, so and then we say, well, it's the speeds can't be achieved by the aircraft that we know today. We can't reach ridiculous speeds, and the problem is that people don't do enough research. In 1963, David Adair was making rockets that were traveling at 8,450 miles an hour. In fact, it left Earth and hit space so fast that they thought the rocket had blown up on its pad. And they didn't expect a double explosion, because a double explosion came from not only the launch of this rocket, but because it reached space so fast, it left a hollow vacuum, which collapsed from the top downwards to the ground, causing a double explosion, blew cows out of the field, took roofs off. The generals are quite impressed about those magnetic engine. Was it a magnetically shielded fusion containment engine? That's technology in 1963. Let's not kid ourselves. That we've probably got technology that can do that. Can it move backwards and forwards in such a way? Well, it can't be manned. Surely can't be manned if that is the case. But let me just go back to the days of the stealth fighter. Well, the stealth fighter was manufactured in 1973. We first saw it in 1991, hit our television screens during the 1991 Gulf War. And we thought, wow, what, the Americans got a new toy, Unbeknownst to us, though, that had been flying around the skies on test ranges since 1973. And what they did is that on many occasions they competed them against pilots flying starfighters. And those pilots reported, it's a strange craft, unidentified, don't know what it is. As far as they were concerned, it was a UFO that was outmaneuvering them at incredible speeds. And 1 minute it was on radar, next minute they couldn't find it. It was absolutely non-existent. Wow, there it goes again. In its day, they were purposely competing against these pilots because it's a live scenario. They want to make sure, that how they can compete. Is what they don't want. Really what they're after is pilots not being able to compete with it. It shows that technology works. I also know from the background, from the research, that drone war technology has been going on since at least 2015. I've got documentation from Israel saying that, and don't get me wrong, the Israelis and Afghanistanis are very, very good at identifying what UFOs are. I mean, and they don't have any problem writing UFO down. There's many, many UFO documents from Israel that say UFO. But there is also a spread of documents, military documents from Israel military bases, which stipulate CIA pill-shaped drones. CIA pill-shaped drones. And they couldn't catch them. They would be outmaneuvered by them. It was a waste of time even scrambling jets to try and get them away. That was 2015. So what are them? And why did they call them pill-shaped CIA drones? Why did they call them CIA drones? They had no problem saying UFOs on many other occasions, but why did they say CIA drones? It's very interesting. I don't know. I really, really don't know. I mean, what I can say is go back and look at the times when these incidents happened, right from the first Tic Tac incident. And every time there was an incursion, every time military pilots, were pitted against these craft to go out there and come head to head with these things. There'd always been a recent military installation on board the Roosevelt or the Nimitz or a number of other vessels in regarding high-tech radar systems and numerous different other pieces of equipment. And it was always just after that installation when pilots would encounter these things. It's like wondering, and what are they trying to achieve? Is this where they fitted new material, new radar systems, and they want a live scenario against some of the most exotic aircraft that we have on planet Earth now, which is probably pilotless because that's the way to go, against some of the best pilots that we have flying aircraft. And there's probably no comparison. And I don't think we're the only ones. I think that China and Russia have them. There's plenty of patents that they've got to show that they've been working on drone technology, hypersonic drone technology for the last 25 years. So I wouldn't want to place my bet, Andy, on that. I say, okay, it's the phenomena. Because to me, the UFO phenomenon is one that materializes, dematerializes, it morphs, it creates certain infrasonic frequencies, has the observe effect, and all these are, it can split. Sometimes some of these things just split into two, and it's remarkable. Some of the phenomena, but I'm not seeing it present in a location that could be like a new Area 51. It's better than Area 51 because you can't fly over it. You can't take a ship through it. So a militarized zone. You can't see it from land because it's too far out. It's beyond the horizon. The operations. Isn't that a perfect place? That's the best place, probably, or one of the best places, apart from probably Antarctica. But to conduct these things in a very specific region, only used by the Navy for these particular tests. I'm not. I'm on the shelf. I'm on the shelf. I'll tell you, I really am. I was very suspicious about ATIP coming out. I mean, when it first did, because the first thing that they did is, on the TTSA, is they got a big conference together and they went out to the world, and there was a big screen behind them showing this object on the screen. The photograph of that object on the screen was a minor balloon.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was my photo, and which had been taken for only one place on the internet, which was on the Jeff Rent sightings website. And it had not only been taken, but it had been manipulated, been light blasted, and put up and used. And I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I thought, hang on a second, not even my team would do that. I'm not going to be daft enough to do that. And we're supposed to be talking about some of the most academic science guys in the subject who were lined up there on the stage. And I thought to myself, how can they, something don't ring right here. the control over it, how it's been perceived. So I was very, very suspicious right from day one. I mean, it helps when I had a relative. It was a Top Gun trainer. Flavor was a Top Gun trainer originally as well. So, but so was an uncle of mine, and they tell me about how things work and procedures. So sometimes, yeah, they just don't know where they're going to go out, and they're pitted against. They're always pitted against new technology. All pilots are. They'll never say it. They'll never say that on one day I was told to just fly out to this zone, and then wham bam bingo, I was up against an F-22 Raptor or whatever, and I had absolutely no chance. They'll never tell you that, but that's what they do. It's a live scenario. It's like when you're in the army and they take you to run through the forest. It's not going to tell you that Company B is going to jump you halfway through.
Yeah.
It's a live scenario so they can get the right measurements and all the information. I mean, and then you take all that information and you take it back. In the past, when pilots had sightings, it was like, don't talk about it. It's official secret. Don't talk about it. On this occasion, oh, well, we want the information out. Let the pilots talk. And they were there within next to no time to retrieve all that data. How did they get there so fast? How did they know about it so fast? And they just took it all away. It all sounds like an inside job.
So,
all of it.
right, okay, so I appreciate everything you've said, okay, because you're right that I don't doubt that any military test on their own, because there's enough evidence of that throughout history that it's happened in various horrific ways as well at times.
Yeah.
Technology wise, I imagine the technology we have is incredible and no doubt would mimic some of these UFOs, UAPs movements as well.
Mhm.
Regarding the Tic Tac event, though, working backwards, you mentioned how did they know? So the event was going on for 7 to 10 days, and apparently there were installations along that seaboard that can monitor ballistic missiles coming in from elsewhere, coming in through orbit. So it
Yeah.
would be people have taken that the incident happened with Fravor, and within minutes they were on board and took that information. Well, if another installation or organization was already aware of these objects being there for 7 to 10 days, then they would have been aware of what was happening and what was going on, and if there was movement and one of them's broken away and there's been an engagement. So that would answer that one for me quite reasonably. The drone, absolutely, the US will have incredible drone technology. The Russians, I'm sure they do, but they're not using them right now in an active war situation, which is interesting and telling, given they're quite happy to let their tanks get stuck in the mud and embarrassing themselves, quite frankly, technologically.
Yeah.
The Chinese is a funny one because Chris Mellon came out, very intelligent man, who again on these subjects is more or less, and just actually a few days ago declared again that the ET hypothesis is most likely when you look at all scenarios on the table. He mentioned some months ago that if you look at a recent Chinese rocket failure, they tried to launch a rocket into space and it ended up landing on a rural road, crushing the road, the fence, and almost going down a hillside, and he mentioned, that's the technology you're looking at. However, to counteract that argument from Chris Mellon, to be fair, and for me not to fanboy or just be one-sided, a few weeks later, the Chinese then launched a hypersonic missile which flew around the Earth that the US apparently had no idea that they had, which I probably don't believe, but, that's them keeping that to themselves. The Tic Tac itself, potentially a drone, but why a 40-foot drone? Because Fravor reported the size of it. For me, the fact it dropped from that height to a dead stop, as many of them did, it was raining UFOs, as Kevin Day, as Gary Voorhees said. Again, there's a technological leap that just seems more than 10, 20, or 30 years to me, or even 50 years, in some of the maneuverability that we've not seen the data for, but we've heard the data for. And it's that, and I think it's like Lou Elizondo says, you're right that no doubt we have technology that can go thousands of miles per hour. The dead stops, the turns, the technology within all of that around it, I think negates the fact this is US, Russian, or Chinese technology. However, I do appreciate a lot of what you've said is they no doubt have tech that's far superior than what we know.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to researchers all around the world, Andy, and you'll say, okay, I don't think, then they'll say, yeah, well, because of the maneuvers and how they did so many things, I don't really think it's our technology. But then when you start to question them about the, secret space program, breakaway civilization, oh, yeah, believe in that. Hang on a second. You can't have it both ways. You got to say, we got to say, okay, well, I mean, I know that there's, I've seen the Chinese, Well, it's a drone. They class it as a helicopter. It looks like a Tic Tac. Looks like
Mhm.
it's a black one actually, and it's roughly about that same size. To be honest with you, no visible blades or anything. It was just a pill-shaped black thing that they had, and that was what 6 years ago. I mean, there's 22 pieces of video footage which is still left to come out. They got film of this, not put it out there. I've got film. I've got true film. While everybody was staring at the infrared images of a heat trace from something that you couldn't identify if it was Tic Tac shaped or not, I was looking at video footage taken from the location. Because I've got real proper footage, and it is a Tic Tac shape. They do move remarkably weird in the sky, as if they shouldn't have the capabilities to move like that. But you don't know if they fully immersive within our environment for one. I mean, why don't there's sometimes there's reports that they don't even make a wake entering into the ocean. Why is that? Because they're not connected with our physical reality in some cases. Something that's not connected into our physical reality can maneuver any hypersonic speed backwards and forwards, just as apparitions can and anything else. I mean, we have a problem of thinking that everything is in the normal, realistic world that we're looking at and feel when we experience something like that. But it might not necessarily be so. It might be the case that they can pop in and pop out. You might be able to see these things. You don't get them on radar, but just seeing them is not enough to represent them in our reality, because there's no evidence sometimes to expect. Like you say, sometimes they might be seen to pass through a solid item. Sometimes they might see to go into the ocean, not leave a wake. They're not connecting with the physical reality around us. And when we're dealing with something like that, then it's something I would say is beyond. That is the phenomena, if that's the case. But I'm not seeing enough. I'm just kind of on the seesaw, Andy. I would love to see more to support the phenomena that I'm used to experiencing within my research field in the UAP, as opposed to advanced technology. That's the problem. I mean, we talk about Roswell and we say, look, you know what? It's been 75 years actually this year. 75 years, can we replicate a craft like that? Taking into consideration, it only takes 2.5 years to build an aircraft carrier, and we know the size of them. But imagine having unlimited resources, the best brains in the world. I would say, yeah, I don't think it'll take too long to work out and back engineer something, as long as we've got the properties here on Earth to create those things. And yeah,
Steve, let me ask, because people are going to be shouting at me if I don't ask this. You mentioned just before that you've seen alternative footage. Was that of the same Tic Tac event?
no, I got independent footage from people on the coastline, the Mexican
Okay.
shoreline, yeah, and of the Tic Tacs in flight, color, beautiful color, daylight, beautiful.
So why isn't it one online, or why wouldn't you release that? The second one, I'm guessing, there's an obvious answer to.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the other stuff. I'm waiting for them to release it so I can match it up. But I've got it, and I've shown it a couple of times on. In fact, you might actually see it on one of my presentations. I've shown
Okay.
it. Yeah, recorded by a friend of mine called Amber. It wasn't Amber, by the way. My name was Amber. But I've got colour footage, and I'm looking at this daylight footage. It's not too far away. It's pretty reasonably close. And yeah, I've got better stuff out there than the Navy are putting out. So and I also know from talking in circles with Hal Puthoff, there's about 22 videos they've got which have never been released. There's not just gun camera infrared footage. You've got all sorts of stuff, but I'm not releasing it. I am suspicious, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I look through all the dating times of when these incidents take place. There's always installation of stuff that's happening. I'm just looking for a key element to take place, because I when I look back at main brace and naval operations, I've had these encounters with UAP before, and not like that. They've always been very different. To the point where a UFO, a disc-shaped object, was hovering over the scene in the sky. Then more objects were seen. An apparition of a person was seen who gave naval officers information pertaining to the engine of the USS Saratoga was going to blow up the following day, and he walked off just through the hull. Part and parcel of the UFO phenomena and the apparition again come together. And it was only when that information happened and they went and checked, they realised that if they hadn't acted upon it, it would have the Saratoga would have gone down the following day. That's extremely well documented. It's got numerous different official naval people involved here. And it's a very well known incident. I mean, that's just one. I mean, you could get into main brace, even better, but and then this phenomena, this thing about the tic tac and all that sort of thing. The most recent one was there was one particular naval aircraft was swarmed by drones. That's what he was saying, and then there was a reference to kind of saying, well, maybe that the drones were drones you can buy. It was done for people on land. But I talked to a drone expert, and he said there's absolutely no way. We haven't got drones in the public, just out for the public to buy, with the capabilities of flying that length of time, to be doing those maneuvers and having so many do those over that distance. It was just impossible. It had to be something else. So I agree. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why they refer to them as drones. What's different about them that makes them refer them to drones? At this moment in time, we don't know if the Tic Tac is piloted. We have no idea if it's piloted or not. The maneuvers would suggest no, if it's under our normal physics. Also, that in some cases, some of the phenomena doesn't seem to interact with the physics of its environment, which would lead me to believe, some of these things might be the phenomena. But I'm not seeing that connected to Tic Tac yet.
Sure.
Maybe some of the other bits, but so a bit like that. There are some wonderful toys out there. I know we've got not only radar invisibility, but we got actual visual invisibility now. That's manufactured. It's been out there for a long time. Amongst lots of other wonderful toys and what they're building utilising metamaterials now in a newfound study. Who knows? Who really knows what's actually out there and what's being used? I mean, at the end of the day, we probably will never know. It's probably for at least another 50 or 100 years if we're lucky, so. Because it is such a technological jump. But I would say we've got some wonderful toys. But the question is, if we have those wonderful toys, where are they? Are they being seen? Are they being shown? I've got there's a really good image on that presentation there of an object seen over Florida of October 2019, which we analysed, and it's a very close up of an object which defies normal lift for it moving through the sky. Doesn't have any numbers, lettering, or identification on it, and it clearly looks like something that comes straight out of a Star Wars film. But it's there. There's 20 odd different witnesses. It was a live event that took place. Everybody was recording it, and it was seen. I would say, if for those people that have a look at that presentation and look at that object taken over Florida, that is our technology. But as to what else it could be, who knows? Hopefully, over a period of time, I'll see something that will lead me to trigger, well, okay, I'm going to go that way, it's phenomena, or I'm going to go that way, it's more technological. At this moment, I wouldn't really want to call it, to be honest.
That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFO UAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative game of state full on meta. Can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something on my head and everything was weird and everything was red. And I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me. If you really want to know who I think I be, I think it's you and me and us and we and him and her and that and she and that thing over there and what's that, Jake? But if we're being serious, open your mind, consider your heart, consider time, consider your space, consider your lies, consider your life, consider your eyes. It wasn't a tic tac and not quite a saucer. It wasn't a tic tac and not quite a saucer.